Hello, Paulo Leite here, record collector. 10 tips I can give you if you want to become a record collector or grow your record collection. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. There is more great content coming soon. Thank you. Number 1, don't spend more money than you can afford. Remember, this is a hobby, not an investment. I know your collection gives you lots of pleasure, and we all tend to think, or we would all like to think, that our collections will gain value in time. But if we give a clear, realistic look at things, that's not true. So this is a hobby and not an investment. And for example, I can give you examples from my own collection. I have thousands of records, and for every 1,000 records that I own, probably only 50 for each 1,000 I could sell today for more money than I paid for them. I would say that it goes from $1 more than what I paid for them to probably 6 times more than what I paid for them. But that's a small subset of a huge set. I mean, I'm talking about 50 albums out of 1,000. From the remaining 950, probably there are 100, little more, little less, that I could sell today for virtually the same amount of money that I paid for, with inflation correction, of course. The vast majority, the remaining 850, no, I could never sell them for even the money that I paid for. I probably could sell them for $1 or $2 or €1 or €2 less, but I suspect that the majority of the remaining albums, I would be lucky if I could sell them for half what I paid for them. So I would be selling at a loss. You are spending money on a record collection because you love records, because you love music, because you enjoy doing this. But it's not an investment, especially if you're into vinyl, because vinyl tends to be a more expensive format in comparison to CDs, for example. There are more expensive formats like reel-to-reel tape. We can talk about that too. But no, the majority of the albums you buy, regardless of the format, they will not increase in price. The time probably will not increase their value. If you approach record collecting from an investor's point of view, I would say there are only 2 artists whose prices will increase and continue to increase in the future. I would say those artists are Elvis and the Beatles. And why Elvis and the Beatles? Because in Western music during the 20th century, I would say no artists are more important and significant than those. Of course, there are many more musicians, and this is irrelevant regarding taste. I mean, you may not like the Beatles, you may not like Elvis, it doesn't matter. They are incredibly important regardless of what we think about them. And it's very hard to get product from those 2 artists that are first pressings in great condition, like mint condition. They're very rare or probably non-existent. If you have in your collection a white album with on the first pressing with a low number, they were all number, as many of you know, or if you have a funny combination of numbers like 5555, yes, those albums are worth a lot of money, especially if they are in pristine condition. Same thing with Elvis. If you get his albums from the 50s and the 60s, yeah, they can be worth a lot of money. And there are people all over the world who are going to pay top dollar for these albums. Elvis and the Beatles. Elvis died in 1977, the Beatles disbanded in 1970, and there isn't a lot of product from them that is original pressings in great condition. So I would say that these are the 2 artists that have worldwide appeal, that people in Japan or people in Europe, people in South America would be willing to pay top dollar for those first editions, for those first pressings, if they're in good shape. These can become highly expensive commodities that if you have them and if you keep them, the price may increase. And that has to do with the fact that they tend to become rarer with time. Those albums are not being made anymore, of course. They were only made in the 50s and the 60s. And those editions are all there is, so we cannot remake them. There are reissues, but the reissues are pretty much new albums that are pretty much worthless from this point of view. There are, of course, other albums, other releases here and there from other artists that can also increase in price, especially if they are bizarre for some reason, or unique, or rare because maybe some artist had a record that was released and then retrieved from the market for some reason. I don't care. But I would say that the majority of all the other artists, no, we're not talking about an investment here. We're talking about a hobby. Same thing I would say regarding other bands like the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones are still around. They're still putting out product, and which I think makes them less collectible than the Beatles. Of course, they're incredibly important. And maybe you can get top dollar for their first albums if they are in great condition. Also, these albums are highly limited because when people were buying albums from the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Elvis, they were playing them all the time. So it's very rare to find those albums in great shape. Now, The Who, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, all of those bands are important and they're great bands, but I don't think they will have the same level of price increase as we will see with the Beatles on the long run. Suddenly there is another fire in California and whoops, there goes another collection of important Beatles and Elvis albums. If you buy vinyl, for example, those UHQR editions or anything by Mobile Fidelity can be very expensive. Same thing with box sets and special editions. And to be honest, I'm pretty unsure if the value of those albums, of those editions, will go up in time. I'm not sure. I'm highly doubtful about that. Keep in mind that nowadays we are at the age of the collectible. Everything is made to be collectible. Every artist is putting tons of stuff there supposedly to be collectible. But in the end, it's just plastic. I have several box sets that I bought that pretty much disintegrated over time. They're designed to get your money and their prices will not go up in time. On the contrary, in a few years they're going to release something even more collectible, so they say, and that thing that you bought 10 years ago is not going to be sold for anything better than you paid for. Now, I'm not saying that your record collection is worthless. Not at all. What I'm saying is that you're very unlikely to recoup the money that you paid for it. Number 2, educate yourself. Learn about music, learn about genres, subgenres, artists, musicians, studios, record labels, formats, the technology. Learn because it increases the probability of you finding stuff that you like. Sometimes you go into a record shop and you find artists that you never heard of, or someone that you are not certain if you're going to like that artist. Well, sometimes you know the musicians that play there. Sometimes you know it belongs to a certain trend or a certain movement or a certain era that you enjoy. And the probability of you buying that record and enjoying it goes much higher. So the more you know about music, the more you know about records, the higher are the probabilities of you knowing exactly what will please you and what will not please you. The more you learn about these things, the more layers of enjoyment you will be adding to your experience. There were subgenres and artists I never heard about that on my own education I found out that I started to enjoy very much. This will give you confidence whenever you buy something, because you know it's going to work. Also, by educating yourself, you are saving money because it's not necessarily true that the best editions of any album will be the most expensive one. Many times you can find great stuff for a very low price if you know what you're looking for. If you educate yourself, the more you're going to find albums that are pretty good and you can afford them. Number 3, always follow your personal taste. Don't buy albums because people like it or because it's fashionable or because everybody's buying them. Buy it because you know it and you like it. And take it from there. If you enjoy a certain genre or a certain artist or a group of artists or a time period, music from a certain period in time, invest in that. Buy those albums, buy those artists, grow your collection from there. If you do that, in time you're going to see that your collection is going to give you a lot of listening pleasure. Remember, always enjoy your collection. It exists for you. Number 4, curation. Curate your collection because a lot of the stuff that exists pretty much is trash. And that makes the difference between a collector and a hoarder. What is a hoarder? A hoarder is someone who buys indiscriminately. They buy everything that looks good. They want to see the albums on the shelves. They don't really know what they're buying, or they don't understand exactly anything about editions, or they pretty much don't know anything. And they just buy stuff and accumulate them. They probably don't listen to most of the albums they have. They buy too much, so much they can't listen to half of what they have even. It's pretty sad, but well, there are some people just like that. Don't become one of them. Collecting and hoarding are two completely different things. I'll give an example. I go a lot to fairs, and I find lots of albums there that are cheap, of course. And for certain artists, especially artists from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, from the jazz era, for example, or classical music, there are tons of cheap editions. Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, Duke Ellington, or classical composers. There is plenty of compilations, cheap compilations containing lesser quality master recordings. And those albums they're okay if you don't have any album from these artists. But once you have a certain collection, or if you enjoy those artists, probably buying lots of those albums will only fill your collection with cheap editions that pretty much are worthless. The collector knows which albums he's buying. So if I love certain artists, I will look for the studio albums of those artists, because number one, they usually tend to have the best sound, and I avoid buying the same recordings on different albums. When you buy indiscriminately compilations, or when you're hoarding albums, you will end up with the same recordings in 2, 3, 4, 5 albums. So it's not a good way to manage your collection, and obviously it is a waste of money. This means that as you become a serious record collector, you will start paying attention to editions, to the discography of certain musicians or artists that you enjoy, and your taste and your habits are going to become a lot more demanding. And this is something that you can train yourself to do. Become more demanding on what you buy. Don't buy just everything that comes your way just because it's cheap. If you do this, you have more money free to buy things that really matter. So curate your collection by your taste, by the genres you enjoy, the music period you enjoy, the formats you are willing to buy, the editions you know are best, etc. And that will take us to the next tip. Number 5, set a few rules so your hobby will not become unmanageable. Don't buy trash. Don't buy cheap stuff just because it exists. Buy what you really want. But there are more rules that you can follow. Try not to bother your neighbors, your spouse, your kids, especially if they don't enjoy necessarily the same music you do. If you fight with your girlfriend over your collection, either you let it become unmanageable or you need another girlfriend. Also, try to keep your collection organized. There are several ways to organize a collection. The most common way to organize a collection is by genre, and inside genres by alphabetical order. That's what most people do. But also, depending on your taste and the range of your collection, you may also want to consider to organize it based on time periods or themes or anything else that makes sense to you. Another rule I have for myself, for example, is I never buy cheap classical music editions. I love classical music and I have tons of it in my collection, but frequently I see lots of records that are cheap editions, especially on record fairs, and they are very cheap. But if I start buying those, I'm going to be clogged with cheap albums that I don't really care about. So whenever I'm buying specifically for classical music or jazz, for example, I always try to get the best editions. Also, set the rules on stuff that you know you don't want to spend money on. Set up a rule about how much money you're willing to spend every month. Another useful rule, if you don't listen to the difference, don't spend the money. If you have an album and a very special edition that's very expensive from the same album that supposedly have a better quality in terms of sound, but you don't listen to it, why buy it? Why spend the extra money? Keep in mind that there are editions of certain albums that are very expensive and they promise to have the ultimate quality in terms of sound, but it only really makes sense if you have the proper equipment to play them. They may cost 3-4 times the price of a regular edition, but the equipment in which you play those editions will probably not give you a big difference. This is true regarding, for example, those very expensive vinyl editions of classic albums, or also stuff like formats like Super Audio CD or higher resolution formats. If you're listening to a headphone on your way to work, you probably are not getting that quality. So why spend the money on those? One rule I follow, for example, is that I never buy something that is damaged. Yes, sometimes you have to put your collection in boxes and put them in the garage, either because you have kids or because you need a space for something else. It's fine. Sometimes your collection needs to become an archive, and it's okay. We do the best we can with the little we have, and it's fine. There are lots of rules that you can set for yourself that can help you buy better records or grow your collection in a more sustainable way. If you're fighting over money because you spend too much, or because there is not enough space to put your collection, or for some other reason, stop and think. Never, never, never fight with your spouse or your family over your collection. This is supposed to be a source of pleasure, never a source of conflict. If there is conflict, you're doing it wrong. There are other things in life that are more important than a record collection, and you should never lose sight of that. I would say that your spouse, kids, your family, your job, these are things that are very, very important in anyone's life. So you should never let your collection come between you and those things. Hoarders have this problem all the time. We are not hoarders, we are collectors. You can be very flexible on your rules, of course, but in my opinion, you should have rules. Number 6, know your collection well, listen to it. If you do this, you will avoid buying the same record twice. As a collection grows, sometimes there are always areas of our collection that we don't know that well. Maybe there were albums that were given to us by someone and we only listened to once or twice, even though they are good albums and we like them. There were, at certain point, we got another album that we were listening a lot more, and that particular album was left on the shelf and we only listened to it once or twice. And then 5 years later, you think that you want that album and you go to a record shop and you find it and you buy it. And you come home, you put it on the shelf and you realized you already have it. Or you listen to this song on television and you really like it. And you go to a record shop, you find a compilation of an artist where that song is included, and you buy that compilation. And when you come home, you realize you already had a compilation from that same artist that you never listened to fully, and the song was already there. So the more you listen to your collection, the more you know your collection, the less you're going to needlessly spend money on records you already own. Discogs has a great tool called Curation that allows you to scan the barcode behind the albums and grow a database with everything organized. It's very good, and it comes in handy many times when, for example, you are at a record shop and you are looking for a specific edition, or you are unsure if you already have that album. My only critique about that specific tools from Discogs is that it doesn't seem to work offline, but maybe someday. And if you're old school, print your collection, have a list of it, take it with you. I would say buying the same records twice, if it happens many times, it's a major sign that your collection is becoming unmanageable. And this brings us to the next tip. Number 7, think about storage. You need space in which to have a collection. I think 20 boxes of records in a garage is not a collection. Remember, it's a record collection, not an archive. The moment you have to go through 20 boxes in order to half an hour later get to the album you wanted to listen to, you know you're doing it wrong. That's no longer a collection, that's an archive. I posted a video several months ago about my attempt 30 years ago to get rid of my jewel cases and start building an archive. And at the time, I thought it was pretty much a silly idea. I'll put the link here so you can check on that video. Oh, Paulo, you're so insensitive. I live in a one-bedroom apartment. Well, maybe you should collect stamps. Depending on where you live and how much you can afford, there is a huge market that offers plenty of solutions regarding how to store CDs, vinyl, or any format that you have without the risk of loss. Research is always a fundamental part of the solution. Of course, not everybody has space, and if you do run out of space, sometimes you do need to go creative and build an archive and put on boxes albums that you no longer listen to much. But that will come at a cost because you know you will not be fully enjoying your collection. Now, I totally understand that many of us fight with space issues. I'm not underestimating the problem that can be. And of course, if you are stuck in filling your house with records, that's also a sign that it's becoming unmanageable. So try never to go there. But also, one of the pleasures we get from a collection is the actual enjoyment of being in the same room with them, having the pleasure of being next to them whenever we want to. Number 8, got some albums you no longer need? Sell them. As your collection grows, you will see that suddenly you have all the albums from a certain artist, and suddenly you will see that those compilations you bought 20 years ago no longer make sense. And if you think of it, maybe you have 10, 20, 30, 50 albums that you're no longer listening to anymore. Those albums are no longer needed. So you can sell them and make some money. Of course, like I said, you will not get a lot of money from them, But maybe for 10 albums that you sold, you can buy 2 that you really like. And here's a variation to this tip. If you have albums that you no longer listen to, especially if they are classical music or jazz, I would suggest to give them to a kid. That was one of the ways in which I started paying attention to music. Number 9, think about your stereo and all the elements of it. You like vinyl? Great! Make sure your needle is in great shape. You like cassettes or open reel tapes? Make sure your deck is running perfectly. Also make sure those heads are cleaned. But more than that, clean up your room, make sure there isn't a lot of dust that will be contaminating your vinyl records. This also means paying attention to your environment. A clean house will mean a clean collection, which means saving time on cleaning your albums and more pleasure listening to them. There are many technical issues, for example, like the impedance of your speakers when related to the amps that you're going to hook them, that may change the sound that you're listening or diminishing the level of the quality of the sound that's coming out of those speakers. Everybody knows what a CD player is, but do you know what a transport is? So be careful. And number 10, visit record shops regularly. Don't rely only on online shopping. There are lots of things that you're missing if you don't go to a record shop. There are lots of albums, artists you can rediscover if you don't go to a record shop. Also, bargains that you're going to be missing. Online shopping is great, but it also has its disadvantages. Bonus tip, keep your collection clean. This is incredibly important. CDs on this aspect are not as fragile as vinyl or open reel tapes or cassettes. If you are big on vinyl, be very careful because dampness can be destructive to vinyl, especially the covers. Also insects like moths and other insects that love eating through your collection. This can be devastating to any collection. CDs are not necessarily unbreakable also. There are lots of problems like the dust that accumulates on the jewel cases. If you love your collection, keep it clean. So from time to time, take your vinyl albums off the shelves, take a look at them, see if everything's okay, and then put them back. Dampness is a big problem in many houses or in many places where people store vinyl and CDs. If, like I said before, if you have an archive and you put your albums on the garage or on the basement, be very careful about dampness because they can warp albums. It's not just the sunlight that creates the problems to vinyl albums. So there are lots of other things that can destroy the album itself, the vinyl. So be very careful here. Changes in temperature that will create dampness and precipitation inside the boxes. So be very careful because keeping your collection clean is also a fundamental part on keeping your collection safe. For example, whenever I go to a record fair, it's very often that I buy albums that come a little bit dirty with, in case of CDs, for example, lots of them come with dust. So they have been stored for years in someone's basement and they're pretty dirty. So usually I take them off, I clean them, I wash the CDs, I go over the inlays with a paper cloth. So there are many ways to clean CDs, and the same thing for vinyl and other formats. So investigate, study a little bit about it and research, because there are also, the market has many options, many solutions to keep your collection clean. Very important, if for example you buy vinyl records from the 50s and the 60s, maybe it would be a good idea to leave them on the desk for some time for decontamination. Don't put them immediately on the shelf with other records. Listen to them, look at the covers, look at the albums. Of course, you're going to clean the albums and wash the albums and go through whatever technique you use in order to clean your vinyl. But also you pay attention to the jackets, to the covers, and see if there are mites, if there is anything there that could contaminate your other albums. People usually tend to think that only the record, the LPs need cleaning. And there are several solutions on the market for that. But never underestimate the jacket, the covers, because there are lots of threats that can lie there. So be very careful. CDs tend to be a little bit more robust, but a lot of CDs also come in paper boxes or digipacks. And they're also prone to all kinds of invasion into your record collection, so be very careful too. Always keep them clean and dust-free. Considering that everybody knows that you should avoid sunlight, I would say dampness is the #1 enemy. There is a lot of damage that a damp environment can cause to either vinyl, CDs, or anything that has plastic and paper. In that regard, a record collection is a very fragile piece of property. So that's it. And let me say that having a record collection is lots of fun and also a great privilege, especially if you have good friends like I do who also enjoy record collecting. Our conversation doesn't have to end here. Let me know which other tips you have. Write them on the comment section so all of us can read them and share them. And visit record shops, buy records. Music is life. Thank you. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. There's more great content coming soon. Thank you.